Udana gat yor asitam nayan muni. Udana gat yor asitam nayan muni. Tato nusandhaya dhiya manasvi. Tato nusandhaya dhiya manasvi. Svatalumulam shanakarnayeta. Svatalumulam shanakarnayeta. Nabhyam stitam hridi adiropya tasmad. Udanagat yorasitam nayan muni. Tato nusandhaya dhiya manasvi. Svatalumulam shanakarnayeta. Nabham stitam hridi adiropya tasmad. Udanagat yorasitam nayan muni. Tato nusandhaya dhiya manasvi. Svatalumulam shanakarnayeta. Nabhyam stitam hridi adiropya tasmad. Udanagat yorasitam nayan muni. Tato nusandhaya dhiya manasvi. Svatalumulam shanakarnayeta. Nabhyam on the navel. Stitam situated. Hridi in the heart. Adiropya by placing. Tasmat from there. Udana soaring. Gatya force. Udasi on the chest. Tam thereafter. Nayet should draw. Munihi, the meditative devotee. Tataha, them. Anusandhaya, just to search out. Diha, by intelligence. Manasvi, the meditative. Svatalumulam, at the root of the palate. Shanakai, slowly. Nayeta, may be brought in. So the translation reads, the meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. So I say, and you please repeat, the meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. So I'll read the purport here, it's not so long. there are 6 circles of movement of the life air. And the intelligent bhakti yogi should search out these places with intelligence and in a meditative mood. Among these, mentioned above, is the Svadhisthana chakra, or the powerhouse of the life air. And above this, just below the abdomen and navel, is the Manipuraka chakra. When upper space is further searched out in the heart, one reaches the Anahata chakra. And further up, when the life air is placed at the root of the palate, one reaches the Vishuddhi chakra. Namhayam stitam hridi adiropya tasmad udana gatyor asitam nayan munihi tatonu sandhaya diya manasvi svatala mulam shanakaya nayeta. The meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, and from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. This section here is describing the yoga system, particularly the Sat Chakra yoga system. So we don't practice this because, as we have discussed in previous days, there is a verse in Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Kritiya Dhyayato Vishnum Tretayam Yajato Makai Dwapare Paricharyayam Kalar Yadhari Kirtanat. That in the age of Krita Yuga or Satya Yuga, the process for spiritual purification was the meditative or the Ashtanga Yoga process. In Treta Yuga, Tretayam Yajato Makai, the process in Treta Yuga was various yagyas. Then in Dwapara Yuga, Dwapare Paricharyayam, in Dwapara Yuga, the process was deity worship and Kalar Yadhari Kirtana. But the process in Kali Yuga is the Hari Kirtana, chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So that's why we don't practice this. As Prabhupada said in a previous purport or two ago, that the atmosphere in the age of Kali Yuga is not favorable to the yoga systems. We cannot properly do yoga in the age of Kali Yuga. Not only that, but the human body and the general character of modern humans is too disturbed to be able to practically make any use of this yoga system. So the past verse, 2.2.19, this verse, 2.2.20, and tomorrow's verse, 2.2.21, describe this process of Sat Chakra Yoga. There are 6 chakras in the body. In modern literature, it's described as 7, but one of them is not considered generally actually a chakra. Which one I tried to get a handle on today, but I couldn't figure it out, which one is actually not considered a chakra. But the system is called the Sat chakra. Sat means 6. And if you look at any modern image or graphic describing the yoga systems, you'll see that there are 7 chakras. You know, there's the bottom one, which is the Muladhara chakra, which is, you know, located around the anus. Then there is the Svadhisthana chakra, which is, you know, a little higher than that, sort of midway, and is concerned with being situated properly with sex drive and so many other things. That's the Svadhisthana chakra. Then above that is the Manipura, or as Prabhupada called it here, Manipuraka chakra, which is a little higher than that, the navel or around that point. Then we have the Anahata chakra, which is the heart chakra. Above that is the Vishuddha chakra, which is the throat chakra. Then we have the Agya chakra, which is the third eye or mid in the head. And then we have the final Sahasrara chakra, which is at the very top of the head. So I think it's the top one that's not actually considered a chakra, but it figures into the yoga systems, but it's not actually considered a chakra. Though I couldn't figure it out. What's the difference between this Sapta chakra and Sat chakra system? I couldn't figure it out. It neither mentions it in Prabhupada's books nor in yoga literature anywhere that I could see on the internet, so I couldn't figure it out. But the idea is to gradually push the life airs upward. So in our usual classic understanding of yoga, the Ashtanga yoga system, the actual idea is to move the life airs from where they generally drop to, which is the bottom chakra. We move them up to from the Muladhara chakra. The Muladhara chakra, we move it up to the next one up, which is the Svadhisthana chakra. Then we go from that to the Mani Pushpaka, or the Manipuri chakra, from the Manipuri chakra, and then to the heart chakra, the Anahata chakra. And in the heart is where the supersoul resides. And so the Ashtanga yogi is rising the life airs to the heart chakra. And there at the heart chakra, one sees the supersoul, the size of the thumb within the heart. But this is a different process. This is the Sat chakra yoga system. And we're going beyond the heart chakra up to the Vishuddhi chakra, or the throat chakra, the Agya chakra, which is the third eye, and then to the Sahasrara chakra, to the very top. And the idea, as we'll see tomorrow, is that the life airs are blocked at the bottom, and they rise by steps through these various chakras. And then one blasts out the top of the head. The soul, or the person in the subtle body, blasts out the top of the head, making a small hole there. And one can go anywhere one wants. This is mentioned in the Easy Journey to Other Planets, that if one wants to visit other planets, one does not need a spacesuit, nor does one have to get a ticket from Captain Kirk, one can actually just, travel on their own to any of the other planets. One can go through this yogic system to any planet. And similarly, one can actually go to the spiritual world this way. Not just any planet, but one can go to the spiritual world. And so the chakra system that we're hearing about today is leaving the body for another location, leaving the material body behind and going to another location. Generally, people, instead of going to Vaikuntha or the spiritual world, figure to leave the gross body behind and go to the heavenly planets and enjoy there. So that's generally what's done. So this is why the Sat Chakra Yoga system does not really achieve a very important goal. We don't do this. What's interesting is in the autobiography of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we hear that the Thakur received a letter from his grandfather, I believe it was. He received a letter from his grandfather that he would not be living very long, and he wanted to see Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur journeyed to where his grandfather was, and he said he was kind of puzzled that when he saw his grandfather didn't appear to be sick. He appeared to be quite healthy, and not only healthy, but quite strong. And so his grandfather explained to Thakur that you don't know it now, but you will eventually become a very important spiritual leader, and soon you will be known by many people, and you will write many literature. So he made these predictions to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and then after seeing him and making this kind of statement, then he closed his eyes. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's grandfather closed his eyes, and he began to perform a yogic posture, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur saw his grandfather's life force burst out of the top of the head. And so evidently his grandfather had just planned the whole thing. He wasn't sick. He just decided that was when he was going to leave his body. So this is what yogis are able to do. If someone is a practiced yogi, they can choose the time to leave their body. And through this mystic process, one can choose where one goes next, and this is kind of the main subject of Prabhupada's book, The Easy Journey to Other Planets. This process, this mystic process, is quite widespread in certain circles in Eastern philosophy. So this Sat Chakra Yoga system is described by those who do the Kundalini process, which is a different thing. Those who, we see that it's shared by those who are doing the Ashtanga Yoga system, where they're trying to reach the Supersoul in the heart. We see it shared by these people who are doing the Sat Chakra system, leaving the body to go to a different planet. And it's also shared by Buddhists and Mayavadis. So there is a subtle difference in the way that this whole system is arranged according to which, group we're talking about. It boils down to what is the actual goal. What is the actual goal of spiritual life? Now, most groups talk about something we call mukti, or liberation, or sometimes it's called nirvana, or sometimes it's got other names in other types of literature or in other types of associations where some type of spiritual path is being discussed. But what is this liberation or mukti? It depends on what the goal is of the group. So, of course, we as Vaishnavas describe mukti or liberation from material desire and being fully situated in serving the Supreme Lord. That's how we describe mukti. So those who are practicing Vaishnavas, not very practical in this age, but in bygone times, they would unite with the Supreme by focusing their consciousness and going to Vaikuntha through either the chakra system or getting the darshan of the supersoul in the heart. That's how a Vaishnava would use this yoga system or chakra system. However, there are other understandings of mukti or liberation. One of the other understandings of mukti or liberation is liberation from form, which is what the Mayavadis think of. So a Mayavadi would think that what am I being liberated from? I'm being liberated from this false notion that there is anything other than Brahman. So the Mayavadi would try to merge with Brahman by the help of this yoga system. Exactly the details of how Mayavadis would do this, I don't know. Another goal that people have is the goal of being liberated from material suffering. So there, people are looking for some kind of continual bliss. And so the yoga system is sometimes harnessed for this process of trying to become continually blissful. And this lends itself to a number of different things, particularly this idea of some special consciousness that we're not clear exactly what it is or, whether it's the right thing or not, but there's this mystical special consciousness, and we can be freed from suffering by entering this mystical special consciousness. And this is talked about by Zen Buddhists. It's called Satori or Zen, mystical special consciousness. And it's talked about especially in this, system that's called Kundalini Yoga, where one, just like it's described here, blocks the life airs. In Kundalini, there's the Ida and Pingala life airs that circulate parallel to the spine, one on the left and one on the right. And one meditates on these two rotating or circulating life airs, the Ila and Pingala, I think is how it is. These two different life airs. And one arouses the Kundalini, which is wrapped at the bottom in the Muladhara chakra, and brings it up. Now we're bringing the Kundalini energy up, which is not the same as what we were talking about before. Of course, this is a very dangerous process, that if it's not done correctly, one can be left permanently mentally deranged if it's not done properly. And, I don't know what people actually teach in the modern day, because you commonly see schools that describe that they're teaching something about Kundalini. What this is, I have no real idea, because I've never really investigated any of these schools. But this is a similar process to what we're talking about here. And Kundalini, if you look at it from the tradition, it comes from the Agori path, or Agora path, sometimes it's called, or Tantra, it's sometimes called. And this is a type of practice that Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't have anything good to say about. This is where people engage in practices that are very extreme, with the idea of pushing the body beyond all dualities, again, towards some kind of happiness, some kind of mystic realization, which is never clearly spelled out exactly what it is, some kind of unusual consciousness that is what is being searched after by these kapalikas, or these agoris, or these tantrics. And they do all kinds of very strange practices. Now, some of them are actively trying to raise the Kundalini, while others are just trying a mystical path to force them beyond mental, normal consciousness. So they engage in all these extreme activities, like, swimming in a cesspool, or going to a crematorium and breaking open the burning body of a corpse and eating the brain, zombie stuff, and doing these kind of things that are so extreme that they force the consciousness into this magical, superlative state. Now, those who pursue the Kundalini, they raise the life airs, particularly the Kundalini energy, and as they're meditating to raise the Kundalini up, they gradually do this practice where they take a knife and they cut the back of the tongue and stretch it out farther, and finally the tongue becomes very long. This is why you see this serpent-like tongue that becomes long enough that the tongue can actually reach in the nostril. And they push the tongue up into the nostril, and it plugs the middle chakra. And that way the Kundalini can rise fully to the top. So this is the kind, if you read these literatures about the Kundalini and about the Agoris, or this mystic path, you'll discover all this really bizarre stuff. And this is, why Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't have much good to say about this stuff. And this is all part of a mystical tradition that's there in India, the Tantric Agoric tradition, which is where we find people really focused on Kundalini, Now, what we're hearing about today is not quite the same thing. We're hearing about the chakra system. So we said that these different groups have different goals. Some, they want to use this yogic system to, the Vaishnavas, to either see the supersoul in the heart, or to leave the material body and propel themselves to Vaikuntha. That's how the Vaishnavas use this. And then, as we said, we have the other group, which uses this as a mystic path to propel themselves to the heavenly planets, which is what we're going to talk about, I think, tomorrow. And it kind of discusses that concept, where one goes out of the Sahasrara chakra to the heavenly planet. So people who want material enjoyment, now they use this system to elevate themselves to the heavenly planets. Then we're talking about these agoris or, kundalini people or kapalikas who use this as a method to raise the kundalini energy, which does something magical, at least is the way it's usually described. But there's one more possibility, and this is the Buddhist conception. Where this same yogic system is harnessed to become one with the void. That's a very different thing from merging into the Brahma-Jyoti. With becoming one with the void, one essentially realizes that one does not exist. At least that's the advertising. I don't know what actually happens because there's no way we can cease to exist. The soul is, as we know, it's eternal. Krishna tells us that in 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that the soul cannot be destroyed. It can merge with Brahman, and I guess something can happen which makes it appear that it doesn't exist. But in Buddhist circles, the idea is to use various kinds of meditation to gradually stop material desires, similar to what the yogis do, who are raising the life airs to the heart chakra, similar to that. But it doesn't have the same goal. The goal for the Buddhists is to recognize or merge with the void, which is not the same as the Brahman. So the Buddhists are focused on the void, the Mayavadis are focused on Brahman, and we, the devotees, are focused on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whereas materialists who are using this mystic system are focused on material enjoyment or the heavenly planets. And we have others who are focused on this mystic consciousness, the Kundalini people, the agoris. So these are several ways that this same sort of mystic yoga system is seen through the eyes of these different traditions with different goals and different kinds of terminology. So I'll ask if there are any questions about any of this bizarre stuff that we've kind of talked about today. But this class kind of was, sort of the appropriate time to talk about these kind of things because it mentions the chakras, these various 6 or 7 chakras that are described in the yoga system. This gradual progress of the life airs up the chakras started in the previous verse. It's described in this verse, and it ends up in the next verse. These 3 verses are all tied together describing this process of the, in this case, life airs. Any questions or comments? Yes, Rishi-ji. But can you come a little closer? Because if you speak from way back there, I won't be able to understand you very easily. Yeah, sort of.
Prabhupada says very clearly that when after perfection, the core of the hair,
Right.
the soul goes out. If someone is really perfect in his sadhana.
The soul, or what are you saying? Right.
Leaves the body.
Right.
So it goes through the core of the
Yeah.
hair.
Yeah.
There is
The crown of the head.
yes. So it does make a special core over here. It just goes from the core of the up to the
poor, like,
P-O-R-E.
yeah, right, the poor. We hear that when a devotee leaves the body, he leaves through the crown chakra, which is the same thing. But we don't usually see or hear that it actually makes a hole, you know. But in the yogic process, when one uses the yogic process to leave, then it actually makes a hole in the head at that point. You know, the life airs burst out, and it leaves a hole behind. That's described in that, the sixth Goswami, you know, that book that describes Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life. That his grandfather did that, you know. So maybe there is some pore there. I don't know, but we hear in Vedic literature that those who are very sinful, they leave the world through the anus, you know, when they die. They're dragged out of their gross body through the anus, so that they're leaving through the Muladhara chakra, you know, so they leave through that one, whereas those who are actually devotees, they leave through the Sahasrara chakra, the crown chakra. Now, more detail than that I'm not aware of. It's kind of a mysterious sort of technology that describes all those details of how that exactly works. But there's a lot of yogic literature about it, and even, you know, some, it's mentioned here and there in various Vedic literatures too. You had a question?
One question online.
Yeah, oh, a question online, okay.
Actually, it's not very common. Hare Krishna Maharaj, I have heard that the Buddhist destination of zero, or void, is the Viraj River, the demarcation of the spiritual world and material world.
Uh-huh.
It's like holding your breath.
Yeah. Whose question is that?
This is Athena.
Oh, okay, Athena, right. I think some Buddhists must actually be targeting the Brahmajyoti, and if so, then yes, because the Brahmajyoti is synonymous with the Viraja River. We also sometimes call it the, penumbrum of the spiritual world. The spiritual world has planets, and it's in a spiritual sky, and that's called the Parivyoma, the effulgent spiritual sky. Out of all the spiritual planets, the biggest one is Krishna Loka, where Krishna resides. It's shaped like a lotus flower, and there he has his intimate pastimes. And the Brahmajyoti, or the white light, is what is a barrier to that area, to the Vaikuntha planets and to Krishna Loka. Those who are Mayavadis, they want to merge with Brahman. They go there. And I think probably some Buddhists go there. But there are at least three major categories of Buddhists. They're the Theravadas, the sometimes called the Hinayana school, the Mahayana Buddhists, which are Buddhists that actually have a sense of devotion and a sense of going to the Pure Land. So sometimes it's called Pure Land Buddhism. Pure Land Buddhism has the idea that one cannot meditate properly in this world. This world is too disturbed. Same thing we're saying, that the meditational process is basically useless as a way to reach the spiritual world in our modern disturbed world. So we say better chant Hare Krishna, because that process can work in the age of Kali Yuga. But both we and the Buddhists claim that the material world is too disturbed for meditation to fully take effect. However, the Pure Land Buddhists, they state, or their concept is, that one can meditate enough to be qualified to enter what is known as the Pure Land. And there, when one dies and enters the Pure Land, there one can properly meditate and reach nirvana, or disassociation completely. However, one can also, instead of merging into the void, one can choose to be a bodhisattva, which means a Buddha that chooses not to merge or not to lose themselves in the void, but rather to come back and help others to become spiritually delivered to the void, you know. So this is a bodhisattva. So this is Pure Land Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism doesn't go there. Theravada Buddhism is basically the kind of Buddhism that just suggests that there's nothing but the void, and that we need to, through various kinds of meditation, we come to the state that we realize that we don't really exist, that everything is suffering, and that consciousness is an illusion. And that when we fully recognize consciousness being an illusion, that is the same thing as ceasing to exist, you know. So how this philosophy is attractive to people kind of beats the, you know, pants out of me. You know, I can't figure out why people are attracted to a philosophy like this. But, you know, there's this kind of feeling of compassion. And there are some Buddhists who are basically devotional in their intent. In the book, you know, The Sixth Goswami, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that he had a conversation with a Buddhist monk from Myanmar. And he asked the Buddhist monk, tell me about your philosophy. How do you understand Buddhism? And the monk said, we Buddhists, we are trying to worship God in the form of Buddha, and by worshiping him, we will go to the world where he lives. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, you know, or he wrote in his, autobiography, he wrote, the Buddhists did not understand that he was not describing his philosophy, he was describing our philosophy. And he said he must have never read any Buddhist books. So I think this kind of happens, you know, that there are, you know, Buddhists who basically are just Vaishnavas, but they don't actually know it. They think of themselves as Buddhists, but they're actually Vaishnavas. I personally, when I was living in the Orient, when we were doing Sankirtan, we would go around, and then when things got when you got tired, or if you had some japa left to chant, I would just go in a Buddhist temple, and you could chant japa in there. No one would pay any attention to you because Buddhists do that too. And everybody just thought, well, here's just somebody doing what everybody does in the temple. And in the Buddhist temple, you see artik trays, you see altars with Buddha on it, you see people coming and bringing bananas and rice, you see ladies in there cleaning and offering incense to the Buddha. You know, it's exactly like a, you know, temple that we would know, you know, and it's kind of amazing, you know, how similar it was in so many different ways, because Buddhism is very close in culture, maybe not philosophy, but in culture, from the Vedic tradition from which it derives, you know. So Buddhism grew out of the Vedic system. And that's why there's so many cultural and, ornamental and, ritual similarities. And in some cases, it appears the similarities are not just superficial, that there are some classes of Buddhists who basically are Vaishnavas, but they don't think of themselves as Vaishnavas. They just are, you know. Whereas the Theravadas are certainly not. Their whole idea is quite different. And their whole path is very, very, difficult. You know, with the Theravadas, you've got Zen and these kind of things where you're trying to understand that nothing exists. So it's a sort of completely different kind of Buddhism from the what we just talked about, the Mahayana Buddhism, which sometimes bleeds over into Vaishnavism. There's a third kind of Buddhism, which is called Vajrayana Buddhism, the diamond path. And Vajrayana Buddhism is that stuff which is really quite next door to the Tantra stuff we talked about. So it's not a very often talked about kind of Buddhism. But that's where you get all this mystic Tantra stuff, because Tantric Buddhism and Tantric Hinduism are almost the same thing. They have heavily influenced each other. And it's about this kind of mystic stuff, except the Vajrayana path has it's much more difficult. And it's not so much about this agori stuff where, you're doing these extreme, obnoxious practices to try to blast yourself beyond material consciousness. It's much more austere, where people do various austerities that are extreme. So at any rate, these things are talked about to some extent in Suhotra's book, the various types of what is it called? It's various types of apasampradayas, because the Buddhist Vajrayana path is distorted into a similar thing which becomes the Sahajya tradition in India, so there's a connection there. But at any rate, that's a whole other ball of wax. But sometimes I've tried to make sense by reading these various explanations of these various groups. And then you begin to see how spiritual life can be variously viewed by different groups. And in one sense, the easiest way to categorize it is to understand what that group sees as the ultimate goal. What's the goal? And usually it's called mukti, or liberation. And for some, mukti means liberation from material consciousness and material desire to serve the Supreme. That's what we think of it as. For others, it means liberation from the suffering in the material world by going to the heavenly planets, or liberation from the suffering by depersonalizing, like the Buddhists think of it, or others think of mukti, or liberation, as being merging with Brahman. So there are these various different conceptions. Any other questions or comments? We're at 9, right up at 9 o'clock. So thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.